interesting to me at least, is that the problems that we have, the musical problems we have in today's liturgy, are actually nothing new, but the continuation of a battle that has been waged for hundreds of years. I will give you some examples from the Renaissance, and this battle will probably never end in this fallen world, because that's the kind of things fallen people do. So I want to start tonight by defining what we're talking about when we say sacred music, and I'm going to distinguish it from other kinds of music. And the best place to start with defining what is sacred music is Pope St. Pius X's Motu Proprio tra le sollecitudini, which is published in, Felicity, do you remember? Putting her on the spot.
Oh, like what year or what talking?
Like when? You remember? General? Okay, more than 100 years ago, so 1903. So it remains one of the best, but certainly not the only magisterial document, but one of the best that actually says this is what sacred music is and this is what it isn't. Now, Pius X, I'm trying to remember when he was elected. I'm thinking it was sometime in the summer of 1903. Not absolutely sure, but this motu proprio was promulgated in November of that same year. So basically it was something he did almost right off the bat. And he wrote this motu proprio because he was, these are my words, not his, fed up with the condition of sacred music in the church. And the key problem that he addresses is that popular music styles, and in his day it was operatic and theatrical music, popular music styles had infiltrated the church, and his language is actually very, very strong. He says, nothing should have place, therefore, in the temple that is calculated to disturb or even merely to diminish the piety and devotion of the faithful. Nothing that may give reasonable cause for disgust or scandal. Nothing, above all, which directly offends the decorum and sanctity of the sacred functions and is thus unworthy of the house of prayer and the majesty of God. So here's where he gets really serious. He's essentially saying, we have to solve this problem, and what we don't want, where does he say this? He refers to, he essentially says, if we do these things, if we have music like this, which is theatrical and pop, if we do this, then it is vain to hope that the blessing of heaven will descend abundantly upon us, when our homage to the Most High, instead of ascending in the odor of sweetness, puts into the hand of the Lord the scourges wherewith of old the divine Redeemer drove the unworthy profaners from the temple. So it's pretty safe to say he was worked up about this. Yeah, so he gives us, he talks about why sacred music is so important. It is an essential part of the solemn liturgy, right? So it's not like, if you think about all the arts, okay, that creates artists who created statues and stained glass and paintings, craftsmen who created beautiful vestments, all those things are beautiful and worthy and venerable, but they are not essential to the Mass, right? You could have Mass out in a field. You could have Mass in a building without statues. You don't, all those things are wonderful, beautiful, and we love them. But you can't take the sacred texts out of the Mass because they are the Mass, right? So those sacred texts, which are meant to be sung, are an integral part of the Mass. So here's what he has to say. Sacred music, being a complementary part of the solemn liturgy, participates in the general scope of the liturgy, which is the glory of God and the sanctification and edification of the faithful. Its principal office is to clothe with suitable melody the liturgical text proposed for the understanding of the faithful. And he goes on, but the key to this document is that he gives 3 criteria for determining whether music that we want to bring into the church is truly sacred, all right? So it must be holy. It must therefore exclude all profanity. Now, what do we mean when we say profanity? It doesn't mean dirty or wicked or something like that. It means outside the temple, right? So he's saying, he didn't use these words, but the meaning is essentially if it's pop, if it's Broadway, if it's jazz, if it's hip hop, if it's whatever, if it's polka, if it's bluegrass, it's outside the temple. It is profane, it's secular, right? So he's saying sacred music must be holy, must have sanctity, it must exclude all profanity, not only in itself, but in the manner in which it is presented by those who execute it. So that's a challenge for church musicians. It's not just that the music is wrong or right, but it's the way we perform it. Am I up there, doing a solo and performing as though for the world? That would be an incorrect presentation of sacred music. So it must be holy, it must have sanctity. It must be true art. So the second criteria is goodness of form. Goodness of form. So is it well composed? Is it, does it show the characteristics of well composed, beautiful, sacred music? Or is it something that, and he goes on to say, if it is not true art, it will be impossible for it to exercise on the minds of those who listen to it that efficacy which the church aims at obtaining in admitting into her liturgy the art of musical sounds. Okay, so sanctity, goodness of form. It has to be good music, right? It has to be well composed. And it must be, third characteristic, universal. And so he says, in the sense that while every nation is permitted to admit into its ecclesiastical compositions those special forms which may be said to constitute its native music, still those forms must be subordinated in such a manner to the general character of sacred music that nobody of any nation may receive an impression other than good on hearing them. So to me, the universality has two characteristics. One is it can appeal to people of every nation. It can elevate people of every nation. Second thing is it is universal in time. That is to say, timeless, right? It's not like something that it sounded good 50 years ago, but now it's awful because it represented a moment of culture, a moment of style, and is no longer worthy. Well, the sacred music examples that we will listen to, and the sacred music that I think is arguably of the highest, has the highest degree of these qualities, is in fact ancient. Now that doesn't mean modern music cannot also be sacred, because it can if it meets these criteria. But so this document, very, very important: sanctity, goodness of form, timelessness. All right, or universality, which includes timelessness. All right, so now we have a good working definition of what sacred music is. So what isn't it? So we've talked about the word profane. We know that doesn't mean something that's vile or evil, but it's outside the temple. So pop music, I mentioned pop, jazz, Broadway, all kinds of things. Those things are, by their very nature, secular. They're profane. They may not be admitted to the temple. Why? Because sacred music should create no associations in your mind. Truly, sacred music will create no associations in your mind of anything that speaks of other areas of life. So it's not going to, if it sounds like a dance party, if it sounds like a jukebox, if it sounds like a yodeler, if it sounds like anything secular, those associations, doesn't matter what the text is, doesn't matter what the text is. Those associations make it pop. If it sounds like pop, it's pop. I don't care if the words are all about Jesus. If it sounds like pop, it's pop. So those associations make it unfit for the temple, right? Does that make sense? So let's think about the associations that we have with truly sacred music. And the obvious example is Gregorian chant. When you're watching a movie or a TV show and they're showing like a venerable, beautiful church, and they're trying to create an aura of mystery or beauty or whatever, what are you going to hear? You're going to hear chant, or you're going to hear sacred organ music, or you're going to hear a motet like the Allegri Miserere or something like that. So you're going to hear Catholic music because all you have to do is hear that music and you think, bing, Catholic. Those are your associations with that music. So chant in particular has no secular associations whatsoever, right? So that is part. So to be sacred, something has to be set apart. It's set apart for the worship of God, right? So we shouldn't expect to go to Mass and to hear music that sounds like it could be on the radio, right? So that music, by its very nature, It was created for commercial purposes or for entertainment, and that's all well and good. The church does not say this music is evil or there's anything wrong with it at all. It's just not for the temple. Like, you know, you can wear jeans and a t-shirt in your life, and there's nothing wrong with that, but the priest should not be wearing jeans and a t-shirt, right? He should be properly vested. So the church has requirements, and this is one of them. So here's a disputed point. People will say, yeah, but, okay, so I wrote this song, or there's, you know, I'm just gonna say it, popular, you know, like commercial Christian music, contemporary Christian music, and it talks about Jesus, and so, or it has text right from the scriptures. So there are 2 points to consider. I would say that's religious music, all right? Yes, it has a religious theme. It may have text straight from the sacred scriptures. It's wonderful if you like to listen to it, fantastic, right? It's religious music. That's not the same as sacred. It cannot be set apart for our worship of God in the temple because of its secular associations. It sounds like pop, right? So there's a sound of sacred music, and that's a disputed point because people will say, well, it's just a matter of opinion, et cetera, et cetera. It's really not, I think, but that's my opinion. So there's an archbishop in Portland, Oregon. Actually, I don't know if he's still there, Archbishop Sample, and he wrote an excellent pastoral letter in 2019, and he addressed this matter of religious music and what we're supposed to do with that. He wrote that the church recognizes an objective difference between sacred music and secular music. Despite the church's norms, he says, the idea persists among some that the lyrics alone determine whether a song is sacred or secular, while the music is exempt from any liturgical criteria and may be of any style. This erroneous idea is not supported by the church's norms. So he's saying the way it sounds matters. The text, okay, that's good. Sacred text, fantastic. But the way it sounds matters. There's an organization called the Church Music Association of America that I've been a member of for many, many years, and its longtime head, who recently died, Dr. William Mart, he has written beautifully about the sacred liturgy, and he has this to say, speaking about this very same point. Most frequently, liturgy is judged by its texts, and whatever music happens to set the text is just accepted. My point, this is Mart, is that the music itself must be judged as music, and we go back to goodness of form. It must be suitable to the liturgy as music, and the music itself must serve the purposes of the liturgy. So there is a place for music that's sacred, and you could, if you're having a youth rally, sure, anything you want, whatever contemporary Christian songs you like. If you're having, a church group's having a party, yes, it's not fit for the temple. Now this comes up a lot. If you're a music director, this comes up a lot in particularly funerals, planning funerals, because people often want, not just hymns that I think are wretched, but we'll do them anyway, just because, it's the How Great Thou Art is their favorite hymn. We'll do it, fine, no problem. I'm not going to complain about that. But people want to do pop music. Oh, it was Daddy's favorite or whatever. It's like, well, Daddy's favorite can be played at the wake. We're not going to do Danny Boy during the funeral, right? We're not going to do Danny Boy. We're not going to do this song about this pop song about a victorious soldier. I mean, we're not doing it. So weddings too. Sometimes young couples want they want pop things, and sometimes they get it instantly when you say, well, I will. So just not too long ago, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, bride wanted the Wagner Wedding March. Nope, we're not doing it. That's an operatic song, and if you knew the story of the opera, you wouldn't want that at your wedding. But all it took was saying, I'm sorry, we can't do that. That's from an opera. We don't allow secular music. No problem. Others will kick and fight you. So not fit for Sunday Mass, feast day Mass, funeral liturgy, wedding liturgy. Let's keep it sacred. All right. So Pius X, our friend, who has given us very excellent criteria for judging sacred music, he goes on to talk about what kinds of music meet these criteria. And there are 2 pillars, all right? So the first, I think you can probably guess what it is.
Gregorian
chant, that's right. So that's the ideal musical form, Gregorian chant. And he also mentions what he calls classic polyphony, and he mentions especially that of the Italian school of the late Renaissance. And we'll talk about that just a little bit later. And he also adds that modern compositions are also to be permitted as long as they possess the qualities of truly sacred music. So we're not just saying, well, it has to be ancient or it's no good. There are composers today who are writing excellent sacred music. I'm not going to say it's as good as Palestrina, but who is? So that's absolutely fine. The church is a patron of the arts. The church does not say, no, you can't write sacred music today. So chant is first. Now, you might be thinking, we've talked a lot about Pius X. Well, that's all well and good. That was in 1903. But what about the changes to the liturgy that happened after Vatican II? What about all that? So you might be surprised. Yeah, actually, probably no one in this room would be surprised by the vigorous defense of traditional sacred music that was put forth by documents published during and after Vatican II. No sacred music, no document about sacred music or that even touches on sacred music has said anything that negates or contradicts what Pius X said. In fact, John Paul II wrote a chirograph on the centenary of Triles Licitudini, so in 2003, and he reiterated all those points and said, yes, all this, this is what we believe, this is what's important. So one of the most chant-loving documents you can find is Sacrosanctum Concilium, which was the first Vatican II document to be published. It's the Constitution on the Sacred Liturgy, and it has a very strong defense of the Church's sacred music and her musical tradition. So this is especially notable. This is in paragraph 112. The Council Fathers said, the musical tradition of the Universal Church is a treasure of inestimable value, greater even than that of any other art. Greater than any other art. Greater than Michelangelo's paintings. Greater than his sculptures. Greater than Notre Dame Cathedral. Greater even than that of any other art. That is a really strong statement. So the church is saying that sacred music is profoundly important. We treasure and love all these great works of art. The Pieta, the Statue of David, anything you want to name. We treasure these things, but sacred music is even more important. Why? It's because the texts married to sacred music form a necessary or integral part of the liturgy. They are part of the liturgy. As we said before, you could have a mass outside with no statues and no anything fancy, but you still are going to have the sacred texts of the Mass, which are ideally sung and not just spoken. So when we talk about sacred music being part of the liturgy, I want to get a little bit nerdy for a minute and talk about what kinds of text we are talking about. So there are two things. Felicity will know this if she remembers at this moment. So the ordinary of the Mass and the correct. So the ordinary of the Mass is the stuff that we sing every single week or feast day, Kyrie, the Gloria, the Creed, the Agnus, the Sanctus, those things. So that's the ordinary. So if people talk about a musical Mass setting, for example, they're talking about someone having taken those texts and set them to music. So Kyrie, Gloria, all those things. The text never changes, always the same. Now, of course, in the penitential seasons, we don't do the Gloria, but none of those texts ever change. They are the same every single Sunday, every single feast day, forever and ever, amen. There are also texts integral to the Mass that change for every Sunday and feast day. So the priest, so the scriptures that are proclaimed every Sunday and feast day, those are proper texts because they change with every Mass. And nobody would dream of saying, well, I don't like this gospel from Luke, so let's do something else instead, right? I'm either going to change the words or I'm going to use a different gospel. No, you can't. You can't. These are the proper texts and they have to be proclaimed. So the priest has his proper texts, like the collect and the post-communion prayer. So he has specific prayers that belong to that Sunday. He's not meant to change those words or do something different. He's got to do what's in the missal. So for the choir, there are also proper texts. So these are usually, if you go to Masses, most places, these are usually replaced by hymns. that is allowable, but the church says it's not desirable. So what are the proper texts for the choir? We have an introit, also called the entrance chant, so that's the beginning of Mass. We have an offertory, everybody knows when the offertory is. We have a communio. We have texts that are sung between the readings, and in the new Mass, well, in the old Mass you have the gradual and the Alleluia, or gradual and tract, depending on the season of the year. In the new Mass, you can do the same thing. You can do the gradual. I have, in fact, with me, this is the 1974 gradual, which is the one that was published post-Vatican II, and it has graduals and tracts. There are no responsorial psalms in this book. So most Catholic parishes will sing a responsorial psalm instead. That is permissible, but it replaces the gradual and the Alleluia, or gradual and the tract. So I'll quote some examples from these later to see if I can make this make sense. But the point is, these proper texts, the introit, the offertory, the communio, the responsorial psalm, and the gradual, these are specific to every Sunday and feast day, right? Those are the texts of the Mass. So you will hear people who are members of the Church Music Association of America, you'll hear them saying, sing the Mass, don't sing at Mass. And what they're saying is, sing these proper texts. Well, lo and behold, these are the texts that we are actually supposed to be singing at Mass, whether it's new Mass or old Mass, instead of replacing those things by hymns. So why do you rarely hear these texts? What happened? And why are the introit, the offertory, and the communio typically replaced by hymns? Well, there are a lot of things I could say about that. One is, so when was the new Mass actually promulgated? Like 67, something like that? So this book, this Graduale Romanum, there's one for the Old Mass, this is the one for the New Mass. It wasn't published till 1974. So I think the church made a big fat mistake by a vacuum, a huge vacuum. Old Mass swept away, New Mass. You've got these documents telling you, well, where am I going to find these antiphons? This didn't come along for 7 years. Huge vacuum. The smart thing to do would have been, if you're going to create a new Mass, would be to actually create the gradual and then say, this is your new gradual. But there was a vacuum and it had to be filled, and people filled it with the worst stuff. And I remember, because I'm that old, and I was also, not in 67, but a few years later, like 71, 72, 73, I was a church musician playing horrible music.
Did you do the Peter, Paul, Mary Mass?
Yeah, stuff like that, absolutely. Because I was a complete ignoramus, and I suspect that nobody in my musical group had any more knowledge than I did. And yet, Sacrosanctum Concilium had been published, and it said Gregorian chant. I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. I was talking about the fact that it was such a strong defense of chant. It said that Gregorian chant should have what was translated as pride of place in the liturgy. Now, it should have been translated first place. Principum locum. It should have first place. Heaven knows why they persist in saying pride of place. Nobody even knows what that means. Nobody knows what that means. So Dr. Mark used to say, what is pride of place? Is that like you have a crazy uncle and nobody really likes him, but we let him sit at the head of the table during Thanksgiving, we'll give him pride of place. Is that pride of place? We don't know what it means. Nobody knows. So principum locum. So you have the church saying, this is what we want, and yet there was this huge void. Now you also have to consider the time. It was, people wanted to run wild and crazy with the spirit of Vatican II, and basically people did what they wanted. So all the texts that I've mentioned, all these things are in this book. So I'll give you an example. No, I'll do that later. Let me quote from you. So we know that Sacrosanctum Concilium stands right with Pius X, right? This is sacred music, we're supposed to do it. Let's talk about the most recent revision of the Roman Missal, which was published, new translation published in 2011. So paragraph 48 of the GERM, which is the general instruction of the Roman Missal, it gives you the options. If you're a church musician, it gives you the options that you can do musically for the entrance chant or introit. Well, the first option, And here's a side note, if you're ever reading a church document and they say, you can do this, or this, or this, or this, the first option is always the one they want you to do. That's the one. And the others are like, well, if you can't do that, then do this. Well, if you can't do that, then do this. Well, if you can't do even that, then do this final thing. So, first option for the entrance chant is the antiphon from the Roman Missal or the Roman Gradual. Using the Gregorian chant melody, that's option one, and the Latin text. Now, those are complicated chants, right? And people sitting here who sing those every Sunday know that they're complicated chants. So not every choir can do them. Well, if you can't do them, you can do other musical settings of the same text. It can be in Latin, it can be in your vernacular language, not a problem. So the introit for last Sunday is the same in the 74 gradual as it is in the old gradual, and it's Quasimodo geniti infantes, alleluia. So like newborn babes, here's an English translation. Like newborn babes or infants, alleluia, you must long for the pure spiritual milk, that in him you may grow to salvation, alleluia, alleluia. So that's from 1 Peter. So, so here's an English gradual, and there is no choir on earth at New Mass that cannot sing these, because Father Weber, who is an excellent composer, has written 4 versions of each introit, each offertory, each communio, from the more complicated to the simplest. So the 4th options are like dead simple, something, 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 something. They're just psalm tone, very, very easy. So, not every choir can sing the Gregorian chants from the gradual. No choir on earth cannot sing these. No choir on earth further cannot sing the propers that are in the book called the Graduale Simplex, which is a dead simple version of the chant. So, so church says, yeah, do the Gregorian chant melodies. If you can't do that, do a simplified version. If you can't do those, because your choir is so tiny or so unskilled, you can sing a chant from another collection of psalms and antiphons, and nobody has ever produced such a resource. All right, so basically it doesn't exist. No, I think everybody looked at it and went, huh? What? So no one, I can tell you, I've never seen another collection of psalms and antiphons that can replace the propers. And if you can't do any of those things, what do? You sing a hymn. That's right. If you can't do any of those things, you sing a hymn. So, is it possible that all of our Novus Ordo parishes and music directors are not capable of doing some version of what the church has asked us to do? So 95%, that's my estimate, and I think it's probably conservative. 95% of music directors have not read these documents. Whether they know of their existence, I do not know. I cannot speak to bishops and priests, what they know. That's not my wheelhouse. But music directors, I can tell you, they don't know. They haven't read the documents. And even if they have read the documents and want to do those things, there's no guarantee that Father will let you, right? So church musicians are in a very difficult situation. So sometimes Father really wants to do what's right, and the music director is kicking and screaming against him. I've seen that happen. And basically, thwarting his every effort. And sometimes the music director doesn't know a darn thing. Father would like to have better music, but can't accomplish it. Or sometimes neither Father nor music director know anything about anything. So these documents have been around for decades, right? And we might think the situation is truly horrible, but it's in fact not as bad as it used to be, I think. Because, it was so absolutely dreadful right after the new Mass was promulgated. So absolutely dreadful. Pop music, both sides now, the theme from Billy Jack, all kind, Peter, Paul, and Mary songs. If you can think of something awful, we sang it at Mass.
Gilligan's Island.
Okay, so have you heard my take on that?
No.
All right, so do you all know the Gilligan's Island theme? All right, there is a hymn. I'm not making this up. Unless a grain of wheat shall fall onto the ground and die, It will remain a single grain and not have life. Not making that up. That's right, yeah, so, and then there's the My Little Pony mass.
Oh my God, yes.
Which we heard
Yes, we heard in Georgia.
Yes, yes.
last year.
I've never heard it live, fortunately, and there are other examples. So often, okay, here's the thing. Most Catholic music directors are essentially acting like Protestants. That they can, they're gonna program whatever they like, and they're gonna feel like, and I don't mean to sound so evil, but they're gonna feel like they've done a good job if the hymns they choose sort of align with the scriptures of the day. That's better than nothing, I guess. But basically the church says, no, there are specific texts we want you to proclaim. These are the things that the people need to hear. Why do they need to hear them? Because we're supposed to meditate on those texts, right? Those are supposed to shape them, just like the scriptures do. Most of these proper texts come right from scripture. 90% of them come right from the Psalms. Sometimes there are some that come from the Gospels, sometimes from New Testament, sometimes from other Old Testament books. 90% of the time it's from the Psalms. So it's pure scripture, and this is what we're supposed to sing. Yeah, and unfortunately, the major organization for Catholic Church musicians is called National Pastoral Musicians, and essentially they've done nothing to correct this problem, right? Now, can it be corrected? All right, I'm going to tell you a little anecdote, and then I think I'm going to move on and start giving you some music to listen to, because holy Toledo, it's getting late. After Trale Solicitudini, say that 12 times fast, was published, Pope Pius X says, this is a terrible situation. I don't like it. It's not fit for Almighty God. Well, did anything change? Yes, it did. Every person older than myself who went to Catholic schools in the, I'm going to say, 30s, 40s, and 50s learned Gregorian chant. Why? Because of that document. Because a woman named Justine Ward read the document. She was either a new convert but she was a convert when she got involved in this. She decided she was going to make it her life's mission to teach Gregorian chant. She created a method of teaching children Gregorian chant, and basically everybody in the world used the Ward method. All these school children learned Gregorian chant. So that was a direct result of Pius X's document. The point is, if people make it their crusade, things can change. Now, Paul VI tried to do something to correct what he realized was a rapidly tanking musical situation in the church. So he produced a document, there's a little booklet called Jubilate Deo, and it contains the Gregorian chant, simple Gregorian chant, Mass ordinaries, Kyrie, Gloria, stuff like that, and simple chant hymns that he said, he sent this to every bishop in the world, and he said, this is the minimum repertory of chant that all Catholics should know. Regina Caeli, Puer Natus, just chant, traditional chant hymns, Pange Lingua. Every Catholic in the world should know, at minimum, these chants. So he sent this document out, and it was, I think, when was it? 70, it was 73, I think, and there was a vast silence. And I don't know why. Did nobody pay any attention? Certainly there were no, you can't point to any discernible changes that occurred, right? So he tried. All right, so we've talked about Gregorian chant, pride of place. It is, chant is something we have inherited from our fathers, and it is jealously guarded. I'm going to play you a couple of examples of chant. And then I think I will play you a polyphonic example. Before I play you this first chant, which is from Good Friday, so it's going to be mournful, and you have a translation there. Chant is not metrical. That's one of the things that makes it. That's one of the reasons why when you listen to it, you realize all of a sudden this is different from any other music. It's not metrical. You can't clap to it. You can't dance to it. You can't tap your feet to it, really. So it's non-metrical. This is one of the reasons why it is so suitable for the Mass, because you all know about the concept of chronos and kairos. So So chronos is clock time. That's what we live in. We go to work, it's a certain time, that's chronos. So it's the time on our watches. When we go to Mass, we're in kairos. Kairos is eternal, kairos is timeless. This is something that in the Eastern Catholic and the Orthodox churches, before the Divine Liturgy starts, the deacon says to the priest, it is time, kairos, for the Lord to act. So in God's time, that's what we observe during the Mass. We're stepping into eternity. So chant is ideally suited to kairos because it's not metrical, and it doesn't it doesn't place you in the here and now. It puts you somewhere else entirely. You listen to it and you know this is a music that is totally different from anything else you've ever heard. So I'm going to play you a section, not all of it because it's 10 minutes long, from Tenebrae Facte Sunt, and you will hear as you listen to this. One soloist is going to start it, and then when it's the voice of Christ saying, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit, it's going to be a different voice. So I'll play as far as that so you can hear the two voices. So, and the reason I'm going to play you this, I'm going to play you an Alleluia from the Easter season so that you can hear, chant is not a music without emotion, but it's a music with, the emotion is all interiorized, right? So there's definitely passion in chant, but I call it a chaste passion.
No
It is an
sentimentality.
interior passion.
No sentimentality.
No sentimentality, that's right. It is a music of the intellect, of the heart, of the soul, but it's not about, woo, that makes me feel good or happy or makes me tap my feet. All right, so here's Tenebrae Facte Sunt. the first two sections of that. So, this is not a lifeless music without passion. This is a music that, well, let me quote to you from, this is from a book called The Chants of the Vatican Gradual, written in the 1920s by Dominic Jonner, and it echoes what you were saying. Plain chant knows no exuberance of sentiment, no predominance of mood in the face of quiet and serene reasoning. It is a prayer devoid of external manifestation and false pathos. It is direct as the words of a child to its father, plain and simple as the evening prayer of an innocent soul. And because it is liturgical prayer, that's me, it demands a restraint of the purely personal element. In other words, its deep emotions and appeals to God are not overtly expressed, but internalized. So this is one of the reasons why chant is different, and it is the most suitable music of the Mass. So, do I have time to play one polyphonic thing for you all? Okay, so I shall. So I'm going to say briefly, however, so polyphonic music, so chant is in unison. There's one, all the voices sing together, same melody, and it's very challenging to do because it is, so chant is a music that you cannot sing correctly while indulging your ego. You have to sublimate your ego. You have to sublimate yourself to the chant, right? It's your master, not the other way around. And so when the choir is singing together, we are also sublimating ourselves to the whole, right? So that we can make a beautiful sound. So polyphonic music has multiple vocal lines, but not just, so does a church hymn, but they're independent lines. In other words, they're not just lines of music where the voices are traveling together. This voice in polyphony is doing this, and this voice is doing this, and this voice is doing something else. So it's a lot more complex and intricate. So polyphony sounds different, and yet it emerged from the chant, right? It grew organically out of that musical tradition, and I will, although we talked about this in class, I will not talk about the ways that it did. But I want to mention, I said earlier that disputes over church music are nothing new. So in the Renaissance, a couple of things were going on. One is, so Palestrina is held up as the ideal example of church music. And one of the things that he did was to prove that you could have beautiful polyphonic music with multiple lines, intricate, complex music, but the words would not be obscured. He was trying to solve a problem that had been created with some previous composers who would literally set different lines of a text, let's say a creed or something like that, to be sung at the same time. So there's no way you could possibly understand what was being said. Now, comprehension is not the most ideal thing, it's not the most important thing, but you should be able to tell what they're singing about. So so the story goes that the church was considering banning polyphony because they wanted to stop this abuse of, like multiple lines being sung at the same time so that you had no clue what they were singing. Well, so as the story goes, Palestrina was able to show them, oh yes, you can still do it, it can be beautiful, and you can still understand what the text is saying. So that was one scandal that had to be sorted. The other, this is something we've talked about in class too, there were what are called parody masses or paraphrase masses, where a composer would take a popular song and basically use that melody as the offshoot, the inspiration for a polyphonic mass. Now, I did not know this. Well, I did know about the La Marmee Mass. What I didn't realize is that there were actually 40 different La Marmee masses composed. Now, what's La Marmee? That means the armed man, and it's Loma, Loma, La Marmee, something and something do te, da 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 da, da 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 da. So it's basically like a bar song. It's just na 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 na. So if we listened now to these masses that are based on that melody, we would not hear that song. We don't know that song. But in that day, that was basically like somebody making the My Little Pony mass, taking a pop song and letting it be the influence. So I had no idea that this particular song, La Marmee, was so popular, 40 different masses, right? So that was another abuse of the day. So I just want to tell you that musical abuses are nothing new. All right, so I'm gonna go on. I was gonna play Secret Cherubs for you, but half of you have already sung this and you know it very well. So I'm gonna play for you Liber Nos, which is from the Divine Office. This was used in the Sarum Rite, and it was sung during a Matins of Trinity Sunday. So I just think it's profoundly beautiful, and it's long, so it has two distinct parts, so I'll just play you half of it. Let's see. So that's very different from chant, but it has the same restraint as chant. There's no dramatic volume changes. It's not highly metrical. So this music also meets these same criteria of timelessness, universality, excellence of form, sacredness. So these are our highest standards, right? So not everybody can do these things, but this is what we're called to attempt. All right, so let me wrap this up and just emphasize that sacred music cannot be purely functional, right? It exists for a reason, that is to give glory to God. He deserves our finest. The Mass should be the best we can offer him. He deserves right worship. So when we are thinking about rendering what is due to God, the best we can offer in terms of sacred music is what we owe him. So I would say if the Catholic Mass is the source and summit of our life as Christians, as the Catechism says, do not we owe God our best? And shouldn't the music we sing represent the dignity and holiness of the Mass, using the text that the Church has given us? So we should, I think, render unto Caesar the secular things that belong to him, and to God only the holy things that belong to him. So, thank you. So ask me anything you wanna, or make any observations.